Well, hello everyone. Today I have the pleasure once again to be joined with Daniel Sharp.
Yes,
Daniel,
it's an
how the heck have
honor.
you been doing?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, excellent, excellent. It's been a whirlwind lately. Everything
Yeah.
going on since last we spoke. How do you feel? Let's jump right into it. How do you feel with the Salman Rushdie attack? What does that say about not just the right to free speech, the right to free expression, but specifically the right, the freedom to write, the freedom to inquire, the freedom to question.
The right to write, you might say.
Yeah, the rights to rights.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, that when I saw the news, I just opened up my phone on Friday. Last Friday, we're recording this on Monday the 15th, and I was just sort of scrolling through Facebook as you do, and then yeah, I just saw it was literally just breaking news at that moment. Salman Rushdie has been attacked or stabbed or whatever it was. And I'm not usually floored by news, even when I'm shocked or dismayed by the news. I'm rarely kind of floored by it, but that really floored me. Um, so I spent most of that night awake, um, writing a little piece for Only Sky and doing various other things, recording some readings of little bits from Rushdie's oeuvre. So yeah, it was just complete shock and horror. And yeah, it's I think Rushdie has made this point himself, that when a writer's attacked, it's not just an attack on a writer; it's an attack on the reader as well, because the whole idea of this
Precisely.
is to shut down, to stop people reading certain things. So it's an attempt to control the literary scene, essentially. It's not just one writer; it's on writing, on literature, and on reading in general.
Right. No, absolutely. That's a good point. I would even go as far as say it's not an attack just on a single man, Rushdie in this particular case, but it's an attack on humanity. It's an attack on what we value, what we cherish, what we take so precious, and what we seem to often to neglect of how valuable and how precious it actually is. Um, this attacker, this individual, and those like him would either have the preference to praise him or the preference to perhaps even have done it themselves. These are enemies of humanity. There's not enemies of one particular person. These are enemies of humanity.
Mm. Yeah, indeed. I mean, during the original years of I would call them the original years, but these clearly still are the Fatwa years.
Right.
During the first decade or so, anyway, uh, Rushdie was always at pains to point out that his was, perhaps a dramatic and exceptional case in many ways, but it was by no means the only case, and particularly dissidents in the Muslim world, which I think we've spoken about
Yes.
before in the last conversation. Writers, dissidents, heretics, blasphemers were being murdered all the time and persecuted, and he always drew attention to their causes and to their plights. And during those years, there was this little book published called For Rushdie, which was a collection of, I don't know, about 100 or so little pieces by Arab and Muslim writers in defense of free speech. That was the subtitle. And well, it does what it says on the cover. It's all of these, many of them persecuted themselves, who wrote in support of Rushdie and said his fight is our fight. I think that's what Edward Said says. Rushdie is standing for all of us right now.
Yes.
So yeah, it's certainly not just an attack on one person; it's an attack on a whole set of values and an attempt to extinguish certain values.
Precisely. No, I think it's a good use of phrase there, to extinguish value. I think it is. I think it's to extinguish the flame, the eternal flame, as I would like to refer to it, as of the enlightenment, the only flame we've ever known, the only warmth we've ever known. And it
Yeah.
is an attempt to put that out, an attempt to cork the flames, attempt to get rid of it, attempt to actually put out all these values that we've worked so hard for tirelessly, that we've fought for generations, that we've actually been persecuted ourselves to acquire these things.
Mm.
And I think we become ever more to the realization that these values, these rights, are not just granted, are not just there for us. No government, no politician, official of any sort will uphold them for you or for any other person or any other peoples for that matter, but it's up to us to uphold them ourselves, because it's not in the favor of any government or any political figure or any person you're using your right to speak or to berate or to mock or to speak out against, that you use those rights. It's not in their favor. And I think more of the cases, particularly within the Arab and Muslim world, we often forget that there are minorities within minorities. There are secular humanists filled in the Arab world, atheists for that matter too, and agnostics, and just intellectuals who know they can separate the religious from the rationality, from the reason, from the logic. And they're one of the few tools they have in their arsenal, as we all have in our arsenal. One of the few tools they have to speak out and be protected at the same time. They have the right to speak out and say, I know this from my experience. I know this is what I'm telling you what's going on. And using those rights, using those modes of democracy, the voices of love, voices of reason, the voices of intellectualism, the voices of understanding, the voices of minorities, the voices of minorities within minorities, are the ones we don't realize that if you limit, if you censor, if you diminish, if you put out this flame, you're infringing and harming them most definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's quite important to mention. In some ways, yes, this is a conflict of values between what we might very broadly call the Enlightenment and Islam as it is understood. And maybe not by a majority of Muslims, but a majority of public Islam, Muslim countries, Muslim governments, organizations tend to fall on the wrong side of these debates, in my view. But by no means all Muslims. There are plenty of Muslims who have come out and supported Rushdie and said, I was offended by the satanic verses, by some things Rushdie has said, but I fully support his right to challenge those ideas, and it's only by exchanging ideas, providing my own arguments in response, that we can really be free, not by reacting with violence. And I think we should hear a lot more from those Muslims rather than the self-appointed community spokespersons,
right?
Who tend to be conservative men and who tend to anoint themselves as the voice of Islam. I think they need to be overthrown.
I completely concur with you on that. And in many ways, it seems to almost be a tyranny within those kind of communities. They're the individuals whose voices should be and ought to be heard are usually stifled by those figures, those loud male conservative Islamist voices in those communities, by these self-appointed, self-righteous individuals who claim some authority which no one has ever bestowed on them. I think that is a problem. I think the problem we don't address enough. When something is going wrong, and it happens to be with respect to Islam or Muslim community, why do we always hear from those type of individuals? I want to hear the spectrum. I want to hear from all voices. I want to see the voices of dissent. I want to hear. I want to know dissentient. I want to hear those voices. Those are the ones that matter. Those are the ones that are going to tell you something that might not otherwise be showcased. That might not be the nicest, most pleasant thing to hear, but it still might be truthful and may very well hold something dear of value for how we can cooperate, understand what's going on, and counteract these occurrences, and help those individuals too, and protect them and ensure their rights are not taken away from within that community setting too. We forget that those communities often act like organisms themselves in many ways, stifling individuals who otherwise would speak out. So yeah, I completely agree.
There's a whole, again, we spoke about this last time as well, but there's a whole resistance against Islam today. A lot of people Muslims and non-Muslims and ex-Muslims and various others who want to see the religion change, to try and evolve a bit more. Because it used to be in some places, and again, Rushdie talks about this in his memoir and in essays, that there obviously are quite a lot of secular Muslim communities and open Muslim communities, but they don't seem to be as common nowadays. But Rushdie himself was brought up in a fairly secular, well, actually in a completely secular household, I should say, sorry. And his religious grandfather was quite open to having his young grandson challenge him on the idea of there being a God. But over the past several decades, there has been that kind of hardening of Islam, this control of, let's say, mainstream Muslim discourse, or public Muslim discourse, or by Islamists, not necessarily jihadists who are Al-Qaeda members or whatever, but just pretty hardline Islamists, or highly conservative Muslims. They seem to be the dominant voice, and seem to have been so for far too long. Although, as I said, I believe that this has been changing somewhat, and it's continuing to change. And those are the people who should be supported: the liberals and the secularists, and the ex-Muslims, the apostates.
Right. No, and that's a valid point too. And I think that's a good mark of what it means to be a liberal in any period, but especially more earnestly now than ever. If you're going to stand up for those who are on the side of reason, the side of rationality, the side of the individual, the side of freedom in all its magnanimous glory, or are you going to be on the side of the guise of victimhood, using it as a disguise of calls of Islamophobia? I think it is a very shoddy, very unintellectual use of a word. It's phobia. As Bill Maher recently said, and I applaud him for saying this, I thank him for saying this, phobia is fear. And, Rushdie had a lot to fear. And, he warned us. He warned us for quite a long time of this fear. And I think, even if you do a comparison of recent events in the last several months, is why now? Why now? Well, when it was at its peak in the 80s, 89, the fatwa was issued. Why now? And it seems like with everything going on in the world right now, presently, the exasperation of everything, the acceleration in many ways of so many things, the beratement of so much of what we value, the dismissing of things in society, and you look at the which was seen globally for many ways. You're no shy of a eyewitness is when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock across the face. That man Will Smith should be in jail for that. He should have been charged, not just given a slap on the wrist of taking us 9 years or whatever it particularly was away from the academy. That's nothing. What does that mean to him? And this almost seemed like a natural, organic escalation from that. Because if you look at why now? Why all these years later, even though some obscure person, 24-year-old male from New Jersey, chooses to do this, someone who has wouldn't have been alive when this was around, no real connection to this. Is it a cross-generational thing? Perhaps, or is it a natural acceleration of what's going on in other facets of society? Other things taking down, attempting diminishing of other values and censorship in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be hesitant to draw too strong a direct link there between the sort of words or violence thing that we've been seeing recently and how that might have influenced this attack. But certainly there is a sort of ideological link between the two ideas. I'd say actually that the religious version precedes let's call it the secular version, but it's kind of a quasi-religion of its own right now, what we call critical social justice and all of that. Right. Which is not a topic, but the language of the fatwa in 1989 by the Ayatollah Khomeini was completely couched in terms of offence and offending the sacred beliefs of Muslims, and this used to be what happened with Christians and the life of Brian and all of that. And even back to the Inquisition, it was all about you will not challenge these sacred ideas. You will not offend the community or corrupt the community of the faithful, and you'll be punished for it. So I would actually say that the sort of version of that we see today, which I always say I hate the word woke. I think it's often usually quite vague, but again, most people know what I mean when I say it.
Right.
It's that same idea. There are these truths, these inviolable truths, and these sacred dogmas, and you cannot challenge them or you will be punished. And maybe they're not going to rush up on stage and stab you, but they're going to hound you out of your job or whatever.
Right.
But again, I am hesitant to draw too close a connection there. I think whatever motivates Hadi Matar to attack Salman Rushdie was almost certainly to do with fatwa. Whether lone wolf, although I think a lot of people are saying that seems unlikely now because of his apparent connections to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Right. Yes.
He's a celebrator of Qasem Soleimani, and he has photos of Khomeini plastered over a Facebook account which apparently belongs to him. And I think there was some news earlier on today actually that he had actually had contact with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
Oh wow, I wasn't aware
of that. The nature of that contact is unknown, but it could be a coincidence, although I'm starting to doubt that that's a feasible scenario. And yeah, so some people are theorizing that it was, even if it wasn't, actually a plot by the Iranian regime, that, perhaps there was a faction within the Revolutionary Guards who hatched this plot and struck out on their own and mentored this guy.
Right.
Because what he did was quite a professional and pre-planned attack.
Right. In every sense,
he had to buy a ticket. He had to buy a ticket to get into the place. He obviously knew what that event was going to take place. He knew who was going to attack. He wasn't going to attack a crowd of random people. He wanted to attack one particular person. And all of that makes me think that, there's probably that he probably wasn't a lone wolf who just got all this from the internet, that he probably had some backing in some way.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, because there's been a lot of chatter about that recently. And I'm presently and probably still will hold to dismissing that, because I don't think that there was too much skill involved in this for some lone wolf. There had been someone motivating and encouraging. It wasn't just somebody watching videos and being, indirectly inspired. I think there was other links to some other contacts going on for sure. This was if anything, perhaps an attack in association with. We forget too that Salman Rushdie's works, not just the Satanic Verses, but not just Salman Rushdie himself, but any author, any poet, any writer, any critic, they're using the greatest gifts we as humanity gave to ourselves. Language, words and language are the greatest gifts we have ever achieved for ourselves. It's not just a mode of communication, but it's a mode of understanding. It's a mode of expressing. It's a mode of inquiring into the world. And it's a mode of inquiring into who we are and who are we in reference to someone else and in reference to the world. And it's almost as if we've forgotten almost the writings in many ways of John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill, perfectly pointed out that it's not just the right of the speaker, but the right of the reader, the right of the listener to listen to that which they might not otherwise find repugnant and deplorable. Because in doing so, it's being an advantageous act for yourself to acquire the knowledge of what that positions of the author are being taken, what things are being smudged, what facts are being present, what facts are being left out, and understanding how they're viewing things, how they're viewing the world. It's the greatest inlet you could have to counteract an argument or an idea which you may otherwise find to be deplorable.
That's the whole idea of free speech, or one of the motivating ideas behind it is the idea that we should resolve our differences with argument and language and speech.
Absolutely.
Not with violence. And that's what we see, when somebody attacks Salman Rushdie like they have, that's an attempt to stop the argument by horrific violence. So it's completely an attack on free speech. That's why back in the 80s and 90s, bookstores were firebombed and people were killed, translators stabbed, and publishers shot in the back and left for dead.
And you look at it too. You look at, I was same as yourself. I was the that night I heard of it. As you know, Daniel, I took a walk that evening. I just couldn't. I was livid. I was trying to grapple what the heck news I had just heard. It seemed too impossible at this point that this would actually take place. And in my little evening stroll, I was just thinking about things. I was thinking, like, you look at even the attack on filmmakers, on journalists, other than Salman Rushdie. You look at the attacks also on anyone, on Charlie Hebdo, for that matter. And quickly you'll find people who might otherwise be sound, rational, intelligent people will dismiss it and say exactly what Salman Rushdie found to be most repugnant when he said, I stop listening as soon as I hear somebody say, I believe in free speech, but. There's no but. There's no but. Otherwise, it's not free. It's not free. You can't only support the word, the speech, the language that conforms to your moral framework, because in any other way we call that censorship. If you're doing just that, if you're only supporting language and words that you hold dear and you find cuddling and comforting, well, then shame on you. Shame on you, because you're not upholding the values which you are protected by yourself.
And in some ways, I'm very pessimistic about it, in terms of specifically the Rushdie and the Islam case, because this hasn't stopped. As you say, there was Charlie Hebdo, and before that there was Yeland's Post and Theo Van Gogh and so many others,
right.
So much mayhem and carnage, and Samuel Paty recently,
right?
2020. It's just never stopped, and so many times we don't seem to have learned anything. We still make those same sort of cowardly excuses. Remember when PEN America, or not PEN America, but people within PEN America were outraged by the idea of giving Charlie Hebdo an award after the slaughter. He said Charlie Hebdo is a bigoted magazine and that we shouldn't be giving them this award. This was after the slaughter.
And those are the voices I find to be those are the voices I find to be most frightening. Someone who's at least upfront of how despicable, how horrible, how visceral they may be. At least what you're expecting. But it's someone who otherwise might be sound mind, body, might be a rational, logical, grounded individual, who as soon as something horrible happens, their whole framework shifts, and they don't want to be associated with. They don't want to be in knowing. They don't want to give praise to. They don't want to stand up for the values which have been attacked. These people will frighten me more because, reminds me of something that Hitchens once said. Barbarians never take a city. Somebody has to hold the door open for them.
Yep. I think I was just thinking, I don't know if I'm optimistic, actually, in a sense, because with this attack on Salman Rushdie, I haven't been paying too much attention to a lot of the opinion pieces floating around. I've been mostly focusing on the actual news.
Right.
But as far as I can see, there isn't a huge amount of that right now. And maybe that's just a matter of shock, because the same thing happened when the fatwa was announced.
Right.
This is awful, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And then you forget it, you move on. And then as time goes by, all the cockroaches climb out of the wood and make their true opinions known. So maybe a lot of the expressions of solidarity are just empty, and a lot of these people will not continue to champion free speech. but maybe they will. Maybe this is such a shocking event that it might actually wake some people up. So maybe that's a reason to be optimistic. Maybe the
Yeah.
barbarians, hopefully, maybe nobody will open the door this time.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic, though I'd be reluctant to say I'm fully optimistic, though. I think I'm more falling into the category, which I usually do, is being more of a rational optimist. And I think in many ways, this may have been something we have actually needed. Although a horrible cause for it to occur, I think this may be the moment. I'm hopeful towards it. I'm hopeful that maybe a moment where we have a kind of secondary enlightenment. We have this realization that these values are greatly under attack. It's it's never been a joke. It's never been something that's just a conversation piece or a little chat over tea or coffee. This is quite serious. People are in hiding. People are in lifelong protection. And identities have to be changed on the move perpetually. This has never been a joke. And I think with this now happening to someone who is beloved the world over, whose works are beloved the world over, I think this is now hit home. I think it is very fresh. I think you're right in saying that, Daniel. That it is very fresh. I think there likely are going to be those voices, those faces who are just saying it for their own attention, for their own seeking of praise towards them. But I think individuals, especially like Emmanuel Macron, really was genuine in that. That was not just something that was empty. I think that was very solid in his words. I think I'm very let down, though. I'm unoptimistic about the beacon of free speech, America, who has not yet said anything about it. I'm very shocked at this. I'm very let down.
Oh, hang on. I think Biden has finally said something, though he took his time about it. He made a statement. It was actually quite a strong statement, but it came, I think, maybe 2 days afterwards, which is just kind of shocking.
Yeah. Well,
he would
still hope there would have been something more immediate. I mean, it's fresh.
What I mean, yeah. But I mean, his people gave a little response, I think, on the day when it happened. But yeah, when a US citizen is attacked on US soil, this is it's a direct attack on the ideas of the First Amendment.
Precisely.
And what the president just says nothing for 2 days.
Yeah. The whole structure of the American experiment in one beautiful sense is largely based on the First Amendment and the way it's structured and the way the absolutism around it. So it was very shocking that I am grateful. I'm thankful that he's finally said something, but it seems a very long drawn out way of doing it. I mean, you think would have done immediately.
Yeah.
These are their values. These are our values. These are human values. It's something we cherish. It's not a Western thing. It's not a East versus West thing. It's a human thing. We all appreciate. We all utilize these values. We all have benefited from the Enlightenment. Always, it's been the human emancipation, is what it's been. We have literally forged ourselves out of darkness into light. We have forged ourselves into this warmth, into this way of inquiry. I'm always fond of the particular quote by Salman Rushdie when he says, in a society that is free and open, there is, I'll paraphrase here, there is friction and tension. That friction and tension are the best sources of light and the best examples of a free society. You need that. You need that friction. It's stagnation, as I would add, which is death before its time.
Yeah, I think, I remember that statement. That's the best evidence of the existence of freedom is actually conflict and argument. It's that only really happens in free societies. In unfree societies, you don't get that. You get violence and censorship and conformity.
Absolutely,
you get that, and that only happens when people are unfree. But freedom means argument. It means the liberty to to have the argument and to keep having the argument, not to end the argument by force or by fiat.
Absolutely. It allows you, especially as the one in the argument, whomever, both sides for that matter, who may not like what your opponent's saying, it permits you now to have to earnestly learn the other side, have to learn where they're coming from, to counteract it, to formulate a better idea and a better idea, but also a better laying out of that idea and a better way of thinking about a topic. It permits you, it empowers you, which I think people don't look at enough as. So you find it offensive, so you find it insulting. This is really, that's a you thing. The empowerment is the fact that you have the same power as I do, the same power as all of us do equally, as to learn the argument of somebody else, to listen to the arguments, to read the book, to buy that, purchase that book. And as Salman Rushdie perfectly said when he was in India several years ago, when someone spoke out against him, he says, well, the beautiful thing is, there's more than my book in a library. If you don't want to read my book, don't buy it. Yeah. And I think that's quite a beautiful thing. It's quite a beautiful statement. We don't ever have to worry. I believe I said this last time we spoke. We don't ever have to worry about corporations or governments being the arbiters of censorship. We do it in a far more proficient, far greater way to ourselves too often, all too often. And we're doing it more and more now. We censor our speech, when in conversation, we censor ourselves at every moment, in our writing, in what we'll write about, in what we'll address, in how we'll address it. None of this is good. None of this is stifling of creativity. This is stifling of thought. This is stifling of intellectuals, and this is stifling of the values that we hold dear.
Yeah, no, it's completely antithetical to the idea of freedom and safety. Yeah. You can't have a safe or a free society without free speech. Safety, because that's how you stop violence. It's how you resolve arguments without violence. And freedom, because that gives everyone the chance, including the powerless, the most powerless in society, to demand their rights. Right. And I think, as you say, Rushdie said that there are other books. You can buy other books, read other books, or you can write your own books in response.
Exactly. Exactly. You can publish an article. You can pitch an idea. It's not limited to one person or one group of people. You have the same right. I do the same access. All of us do. These are tools that we all possess. Hone your craft. Find your voice on the paper. Find your voice in the city hall, in the piazza, in the square. Speak. Don't be silenced, and don't silence yourself.
I think that's an important point, the self-censorship aspect. It's been said many times, but nobody would publish the Satanic Verses today. Think how many novels haven't been written or haven't been published.
Right. That's a good point.
Because nobody would do it. Nobody wants the trouble. Nobody wants the hassle. And usually when there is an outcry against a book, people are rushed to disavow it or to edit it or to change it to appease the outraged mob. It's so I think publishing itself is actually a very attenuated industry these days.
Right.
There's a lot that just will not get published.
And even before, even going back quite a ways too, even when Hitchens wrote God Is Not Great, not only one publisher really, I think, reached out to want to be the first to have initial onset of publication, because others would decline publication because of the topic, because of how fervent. Yeah, and I thought that was telling in many ways. And again, you're right. I think it's telling of the state of the publishers today, the publishing houses, how they're taking stances contra, in direct opposition to the values that their industry is supposed to uphold.
Yeah, and obviously you have established authors who, Salman Rushdie could probably write another book like the Satanic Verses, because he, is so famous and so well known and so appreciated that, he would probably be able to do that. But if he was a young writer starting out all over again, and the shadow of the Satanic Verses was looming over him, he wouldn't be able to write any such book,
Right.
In the shadow of this event from 1989, and most people wouldn't want to publish it. So yeah, just think how many stories must not have been told because of that fear of not even necessarily a fatwa, but just mob outrage, and
Absolutely.
harassment.
Absolutely. And in one sense, one hopeful, glimmering hope, I guess I might say, optimistic sense, is we also reside in an era now. I'm talking to you over Zoom. I'm talking to you. We're recording this right now over Zoom. We both have a Substack account in which we write. There's many outlets for us to get out our thoughts, our views, our opinions, our insights, our perspectives on matters, in which everyone else can too as well. So we do live in an era where there is more opportunity and there is more platforms that are conducive to the writer, that are conducive to the writer's abilities, and are conducive to not the non-limitation of freedom of expression in all its forms. Whereas you might be more stifled in a publishing house today, on any side of the Atlantic, anywhere for that matter, not even just in Europe, not even just in North America. You would be very stifled out of fear. I think that's the winning antidote, which Islamists like, is that once the fear is in there, the fear of what might actually occur, not what is promised, not what is threatened, but what might occur, what might actually be done. And that's this. It's the same. I think it's a reverberation, that same fear, the same initial fear, which Salman Rushdie spoke of, which Hitchens spoke of, which everyone spoke of during the Charlie Hebdo. No one wanted to publish the cartoon. No one wanted to show them. Everyone talked about them, but no one wanted to show them. For the preemptive fear on the onset that something might happen. Well, that's just the point.
Yeah.
That's just the point.
Was it? I can't remember. Was it Charlie Hebdo or the Elan's Post and cartoons? But there was an academic book that came out. Maybe it was at Cambridge or Oxford Press. I can't remember. But there was an academic book that came out. It was entirely about that whole saga, whether it was the Elan's Post or Charlie Hebdo. And in this book, which is all about the cartoons and what happened, I was going to say what they caused, but they didn't cause them. But what happened after they were published, they didn't republish the cartoons in those books, which that's the subject of those books, and they didn't even republish the cartoons, and because they were scared. I do have a bit more respect, I suppose, for the ones who admit that they're scared,
right?
And they don't try and disguise that by saying we just want to be sensitive and
right. This fluffy language, which I've become more and more disgusted by. It's belittling. It's belittling because it makes it sound like those who would even be supporters of Rushdie, those who would attack him, but collectively it makes it sound like anyone who is a practitioner of the Islamic faith somehow is incompetent, to be insensitive, how they're just, it makes it sound like it's actually a form of racism as far as I'm concerned. It's treating somebody as if they cannot be able to think, conduct themselves in a particular way in a democratic, free and open society. It's a form of racism. It's polite racism in many ways. It's treating treating a group of people collectively in one framework. I mean, that's the definition. You're treating all of them the same way, that they can't do it. We have to be sensitive towards them. This is very belittling. It's belittling as much to practitioners, Muslims of the practice of the Islamic faith, as it is to the person saying it. It's the most idiotic statement that we have become so accustomed to hearing in the news and the media, and it's belittling. It's grossly belittling to anyone who's a Muslim, anyone who is a writer, it's grossly belittling, as if to say somehow they cannot conduct themselves in a way that is civilized and non-violent, and that somehow speech and decorum is not possible. It's a very, very ignorant, very belittling statement. Of course they are. Of course they're able to conduct themselves in a way that they can speak, can argue, formulate debate, formulate counter opinions, counter arguments. Of course they can. Of course they can write pieces on their positions, opposing the positions of Rushdie or any author or any writer or any filmmaker. Of course they can. It's their right as much as anyone else. It's ignorant, it's belittling, and I'm sick of it. I think it's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's the bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah,
I can't remember who coined that phrase, but it's a good phrase, and it sums up that phenomenon
it is a
quite
good,
well.
it's a good one. Yeah,
Um, but going back to Substack, actually, I just wanted to mention that phenomenon of what used to be called blogging, but isn't really called blogging anymore. But people having their own websites or platforms, or in Substack's case, something that's a bit more than that. And I think Substack are pretty devoted to free speech. Maybe I think that's probably a cause for optimism as well,
right.
as long as we aren't siloed off into our own little universes too much. Because this is kind of democratizing. Now anyone can set up a Substack and write, and if they're lucky, they can make money from it. But so in that sense, they're kind of breaking the old traditional ways of publishing and writing. You don't have to go through a publisher. You don't have to get an agent. You don't have to censor your opinions because you
Right.
work at New York Times, and you
Yeah,
don't want to rock the boat and jeopardize your career.
absolutely.
So I
Well,
think
the New
there
York
is
Times,
that
the whole
aspect.
conversation itself there.
Yeah. But yeah, when it comes to uh, the bigotry of low expectations, and we're talking about the discourse of that Muslims, if they're offended by Rushdie's book, um, they can respond to it, and many of them do feel that way. And there's one book by Rushdie, one novel that I think epitomizes this quite nicely. It's not one of his most well-known ones. It's from 2015, I think. It's called 2 Years, 8 Months, and 28 Nights. And it's quite a difficult novel to explain, but I think it's actually one of his best, even though it's not very well known compared to many of his other books. And part of it is a dialogue or an argument between Ibn Rushd and Al-Ghazali, the medieval Muslim philosophers. Ibn Rushd, whose name inspired Salman Rushdie's father to take it as the family name to honor this
Right.
freethinker, who was a Muslim, but he danced around the edges of heterodoxy and suffered as a result as well. He was exiled for a time. And Ghazali, who came before him, who didn't particularly like philosophy. He thought that the philosophers, were stepping over the line with their inquiries.
Right.
And eventually it was his school of thought that won out. But part of that novel is a dramatization of the conflict between those values, between those different ideas of Islam, you might say, between the free thinking and nearly bordering on the atheistic secular, and the closed off dogmatic fundamentalist streak, which seems to be the dominant streak.
Yeah. I would say it. I would agree. It's a dominant streak, but I wonder if it's only dominant in it's the loudest. They are the most predominant voices we hear, but not necessarily the most largest number necessarily. I mean, I would say I think the fear and fright still are, and especially in the communal dynamics, still close off either physically close off barriers, or at least put people in a state of fear and fright so much so where those voices remain silenced. When otherwise, even in Saudi Arabia, I mean, we know, for example, a heroine of mine, Rana Ahmed, she says there's tons of atheists and agnostics, but you're not going to say it. You're not going to say you are. Goodness gracious, you're not going to say you are in Saudi Arabia, that you are. Oh yeah, I've woken up and I no longer believe in Allah. I no longer believe in God, and this is not for me. But let's just have a good time. You're not going to do that. I think there's a large number. I think a larger number than we currently know that are still in that stage of being fearful and frightful. I think that's why we owe gratitude, respect and the utmost thanks those who have come forth, to speak proudly, loudly, and with vigor and with force. These voices of love, these voices of reason, these voices of understanding, not voices of contempt, not voices of vile attacks, but voices of love, voice of love, understanding, voices of the experiences that they've had at the hands of what's going on. And we have neglected too much. We've dismissed, neglected, and the ones who should, the ones who like to label themselves as liberal. I mean, I'm certainly of the liberal bent, and I often say, where are my fellow liberals? Where are they? I'm looking for them. I don't know where they reside, because those who not too long ago would have been standing up for figures like Ayana Hirsch Ali, figures like Yasmin Mohammed, either berate, dismiss, or something of that nature, both of them. This is horrible. This is not what are, either we stand up for the values we cherish, or we watch them be diminished and put out, and the flame no longer exists, and we will come once again back into a state of darkness.
I should clarify, when I said dominant streak, I didn't mean in terms of numbers necessarily. I meant in terms of the most powerful.
Right.
That does seem to be the most powerful and, as you say, loudest version of Islam that we see today.
Right.
But again, that is changing. As you say, there are lots of people who are disillusioned by it, who are disillusioned by this version, and who have either realized that the religion needs to change and the way that it's commonly understood among the authorities, or that they're just fed up with it completely and abandon it.
Right.
I think that's a product of partially of the way that version of Islam has failed and completely disillusioned a lot of people.
I mean, in many ways, figures like, a Canadian, she now resides mostly in America now, but someone I'm very proud that she's Canadian, I'm very proud that I exist in the world at the same time she does, is Irshad Manji. She's a reformist, a prior practicing, openly gay Muslim, but she's also a reformist. There is something to be very proud of. There's a vote of optimism there in what she embodies. And her works are wonderful. I would advise anyone listening to this to look her up and look up her works and delve into them. They're beautiful. They're thought-provoking. They really make you think earnestly and deeply on the topics that we might otherwise dismiss or not even consider. And I think there's a lot of figures like her. I think there's figures like her that we just don't know of yet. That's the thing. I think there's lots of figures like Irshad Manji in the world who want to be reformists, who want to have their enlightenment, who want to have their, in even many ways, a kind of awakening, coming into modernity, not a clash with modernity, but a coming into it.
There certainly is a growing movement. People like Zuri Jasser, Rahil Raza, and Saraya Dean, and various others. I think that we should hear from those guys more often, and that we should support them a lot more than we do in the mainstream. But
absolutely, we take their. Sorry to cut you off there, Daniel. I said we take their courage and their pugnaciousness and their beauty, capital B. We take their moral, intellectual, physical courage for granted of what they do. We take it for granted. We dismiss them as just one-offs. They're just doing that. They're not speaking for majority of Muslims. Well, how do you know? Do you know the majority of Muslims? I don't. But I know I will listen to voices that are distinct and that are dissentient. Voices of dissentient need to be listened to. How dare we claim to be upholders of civility, upholders of reason, upholders of logic, upholders of the values of enlightenment, for that matter, and we dismiss those very people who are thinking differently. That's the whole point. As Rosa Luxemburg beautifully said, the right to free speech will always exist, more so to those who think, or to the one who thinks differently. And there's a reason for that. Because if you're all in a state of consensus, there is no thought. There's just conformity. There's just action. There's just modality. There's just automation. There's nothing of individuality. The person who's stepping aside, who's thinking differently, who is actually engaging in thought and not focusing on the what, not focusing on the what, but focusing on the how they think, that person deserves very much to be protected because their speech matters. There is going to be someone who's going to have influence and also exercise their speech to allow us to think too, to challenge our ways of thinking. And that's pretty much what the whole point of free speech is. It's about challenging each other, learning from each other, having an understanding. It's not a matter of we're sitting down and going to sing kumbaya, but we're going to challenge each other. We're going to actually challenge each other. And we may never see eye to eye on 99 things, but at least if we have civility, mutual respect, a sense of understanding of where we're coming from, doesn't mean we have to agree on anything for that matter.
No.
And that's the whole point of it. We don't have to. You can have great friendships, enduring relationships, have a good laugh with someone you might honestly disagree with most points on, and you may have just finished a debate with someone and still have a great respect for that person and where they're coming from.
Yeah, no,
to bring the volatile acts and to bring the violence, the killing, the murderings that we see so predominantly now. And I think the one in France, I had forgotten about that one, and with Patsy, and we're becoming way too accustomed to this as to be a normal part of the discourse, where it should never be a part of the discourse. The discourse is only to have the exchange of ideas and the refutation of those ideas and the formulation of potentially of better ones.
Yeah. Well, as seems appropriate at this moment, then to quote a character from the Satanic Verses, a quote that I've expressed or posted many times recently. Baal, who's a poet, he says, a poet's work is to name the unnameable, to point at frauds, to take sides, start arguments, shape the world, and to stop it from going to sleep, which seems like a good summation of art and literature, but also of the value of free speech and free societies. The constant challenging and examining of assumptions, and the constant argument. That's where the real freedom lies, not in having final answers, let alone final solutions.
And precisely, and it's the perpetual endeavor to acquire truth, to find truth, not to consolidate what you presume already to be true, to hold on to it. It's the fact that it's the touch of it's more than a touch, but it's the pounds and pounds of humility that one actually does acquire in the realization that in endeavoring, in venturing into this debate, in venturing into this argument, in taking this position, in being messy, in taking sides, in switching sides, and down the road maybe switching sides again, and seeing where you lie, seeing where position takes you, seeing where another position takes you. The endeavor we all have collectively is to find what is true, what is actually going on, what works, what functions, and why does it work? Why does it function? One of the most silliest things is somehow we think by framing it as hate speech. Well, that is such an obscure and bombastic statement, because anything by definition could be hate speech. Anything that you dislike, anything that you might offend you. Your offense doesn't really come into the realm of things not being said. If anything, that person, that group, those individuals have showcased reason for you not to want to be in association with them. They've showcased to you in the world why you wouldn't want anything to do with them. And now it's up to you and individuals like you, colleagues, friends, fellow free thinkers, fellow just human beings who have reason, not just even free thinkers, people who are religious, non-religious, to formulate better ideas for all of us, using the tools that we all have access to, our mental focus, our mental equipment of reason, logic, love, compassion, understanding, and the ability to do so, and the ability to grant that and secure that and protect that for our opponents.
Yeah, well, that's why Rushdie said free speech is the whole thing, the whole ball game. Free speech is life itself.
Exactly.
It really is one of the most precious rights. I think was it Rowan Atkinson who said something like, after food and shelter, free speech is, the basic human requirement for life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. And I think the worrying thing about a lot of the argues to stop bigoted speech or hateful speech. You know, it appeals to the good hearts of most people,
It does.
and that's the dangerous thing. That's very seductive, but then all free speech arguments are always very anti-free speech arguments.
Right. And I think it's a good point to make there too. It's not.
Oh, sorry,
good.
hang on. I take it you can edit. Cut this.
Yeah.
Okay. So I need to sort my cat out. Just noticed her. Oh. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right.
Before we jump into it again, I don't know if you have any particular rules, but I do have a little glass of whiskey here.
I have no rules. My rules are out the window. If you want to join a glass of whiskey, enjoy one. Yeah.
And cigarettes, they're good as well.
Oh, cheers. Yeah, no, I think it would incorporate exactly what we're talking about. Freedom and it's the absolutism. Yeah, I mean, you tell me if you want to jump in, throw in a topic, let me know. I think that, yeah, how do you want to jump back into that here?
Yeah, I think I just mentioned about the seductiveness of the hate speech argument.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
That you were about to.
Yeah, and I think okay, that's right. I think a good point too off of that, Daniel, too, to keeping the idea that it is usually those who have tender hearts, those who have caring hearts that actually want to reduce the amount of what we might call hate speech, negative speech, or unfavorable speech. Therein lies the problem, though. That same heartfelt practice, that desire, also is the same enduring heartfelt practice that would put the noose around your neck, because it's the same practice that once you diminish it, you're diminishing for everybody else. You're not just taking away the good stuff. You also are opening the doors for letting in the bad stuff permanently by other bad actors. You're not just doing it for one group, but you're opening up the possibility. You're creating a precedence now for it to be done everywhere at all time. The whole idea is that words can be offensive all they want. Words may be distasteful. You don't have to associate those people. There's no way you need to. But more to the point, you have the power to counteract them. You have the power. You can protest. You can chant. You can picket. You can write. You can speak. You can get in debates and get in arguments. And as you should be contributors to this thing we have going on. Be contributors to what we so endure. Don't just be beneficiaries of it. Be contributors to it. Make it better, and make the day better, but make the future ever greater. And we can all contribute to this. It's a you and I thing. It's not just a Matthew and Daniel thing. It's not just select people in the world. We all have this ability. We all can do this. And if we all do this, we will actually see a better time, a better place, and a brighter, more enduring, more enlightened future than we possibly could ever have imagined, if we all realize the fact that these are the values we all have. These are the rights we all have. But as soon as we dismiss that and say, well, I don't like what you're saying, and I want to stop it because it's unpleasant, and it's hurting my feelings, or it seems to be a personal attack and an helmet on me. that same argument being used against you very quickly and very swiftly, and would be and will be by anyone who seems to feel the same way, who in the same position, but against you now. So in many ways, the tender-hearted, kind people who are doing this, and they are. I don't think there's malicious intent with people who are doing this often. They're the ones who are unwilling participants in many ways to putting the noose around their necks as much as somebody else's.
Yep. I should probably, I don't know what your editing policies are, but in case anyone's viewing and suddenly there's just been a cut and all of a sudden I've got a whiskey and a cigarette, I should say there was a little pause a few moments ago. But
the magic of editing, folks, the magic of editing.
I think Jacob Mitchell-Gamma's recent book about the history of free speech is very good on all of this sort of stuff. He talks about, he is optimistic in one way because he says, by historical standards, whatever problems we have, this is, a golden age for free speech for the most part. But that there is a kind of free speech recession, as he calls it, globally, not just in the West. Obviously we have our problems with cancel culture.
I look at that as
former presidents who.
It seems like a bleep in the system. I don't take it as pronounced and as serious as others. Not to say that I don't take it seriously, but I don't think it's the new way, the thing that's becoming the normal. I think it's a bleep in the system. System.
I hope so. But regardless, it's still a worrying sort of trend. And then we also have more globally.
Oh no, definitely. No, I think it's
the complete totalitarian nightmare that is China. You have India.
Oh my goodness.
Where Hindu nationalism is on the rise, and there's been a lot of censorship in recent years there. You have places like Hungary now, where I think something like 90% of the media is owned by Viktor Orban's cronies. So there is a worrying trend worldwide. But even saying that, is still, as you say, it's still it's by historical standards pretty good for free speech right now. So we just have to make sure we don't go backwards, we don't lose it.
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, as I've said throughout this podcast, I think that's a matter for each of us to utilize that right, to literally raise our voices, not be smothered, not be stifled, not be barricaded off or subsequently barricade ourselves off, but to actually utilize this stuff, to stand up for it, and to stand up for those who we might not otherwise have in our pleasant company. Nobody we want to necessarily partake a drink with, but it's up to that. It's because it's a right that we all have access to. It's something we all cherish, and something that only us individuals, human beings collectively, no matter where we reside, it's up to us to ensure that we have that right. No government official, no politician, no corporation certainly is going to ensure it for us. It's not in their interest whatsoever. It's in no one's interest to have you as a citizen or as a individual, wherever you reside, to speak up out against you and to hold you accountable. It's not in their benefit to have that. Any chance to reduce it, to limit it, to censor it, to brand it as hate speech, or to otherwise just blatantly shut you up, it will be done. And it's no longer the clergies that are doing it. It's the elected officials. It's people, publishing houses who would not publish a book. But I said, as we said before, it's optimistic. We have points of optimism. Substack, the freedom to write, the freedom for the author to actually take the reins himself, not having editorial overseers. I think these are glimmers of hope. These are sparks of the enlightenment that have been going outward. I think we're seeing more of this now, and the fact that we can, unlike with the Twitter sphere, be locked into other silos. We won't necessarily be locked into a silo on these platforms. You can listen to the selected readers you want, but you also will someone who's going to listen to read off the works on Substack of any sort, especially our works and colleagues and friends of ours, you're likely going to read stuff you don't agree with too. So I think there is optimism for this. I think there is optimism out there, and there is hope, and we have to have that, because it's really, what else do we have? Otherwise, we just throw the reins out, and we just sit down and we wither away, and the flame goes out. We have to keep the flame burning. The flame was always burned bright, keeping us warm. At the darkest hour, the darkest night, the moon is always there. It's always bright. It always seems so far away, but once you get close, you realize how big that moon is, how big the source of that light is. And in many ways, I think that's where we are now. We're so surrounded by darkness, and we're so far away from that light, from that source, from that moonlit night, and we don't realize how big that flame is. It's not going to go out. The shine of it, the gleaming hope in the sky, is not going away. And I think the same way with the Enlightenment, we seem to be not drifting so far from it, but we're just so smothered with darkness and backwardsness and regressiveness that we think it's going away. We may actually feel it, but I think in many ways it's just a bleep, a glimpse of this stutter step on this journey, on this inlet we're now experiencing. And I think very much so. I think there are enough individuals internationally who literally, not just figuratively, not just with pen, but literally fight for their existence, fight for their right to speak, fight for their right to have their views heard, fight for their right to express themselves artistically and literally. And there needs to be a lot more of that realization that it's not just something that's granted to you because of where you happen to be born. We may have certain privileges in certain areas, but those can be very swiftly and very easily taken away just the same.
Yeah.
And
I think we
have to realize that fear, fright of what might occur, what might happen, should in no way stop us from writing, stop us from inquiring, stop us from thinking, stop us from questioning, stop us from expressing freely our inner imaginations, our thoughts with the pen, spilling that ink. We cannot let this go away by the wayside. It's too precious. It's something that's far too beautiful, and something we have fought too long for, all of humanity. We didn't just wake up one day and it was granted. It was something we endured to fight for, figuratively and literally. And
freedom is taken, it is never given.
Precisely. Absolutely. It is. It's taken by with every inch. And I don't think that value is being seen enough in certain parts of the Western world. We don't see that as like that. We think it's just there, and we want to now censor it because it's hurting particular people. The words are not pleasant. A lot of things aren't pleasant. I don't want to censor them. Somebody insults my friend, somebody insults me. I don't want to hurt them or censor them. I know I don't want to have anything to do with them. They've made it quite clear that my association with them would never be existing. But I also want to hear the voices of dissenters. I want to hear the voices of people who are in opposition to me, who are in opposition to you. I want to hear these voices. We need to hear those voices. It's not about just hearing voices that we favor or of supporting voices that we favor, but about supporting and hearing voices that we otherwise might feel and think to be repugnant and moronic, because it's getting us a good insight as to how those mindsets are thinking, how those mentalities are operating in the world, and potentially what they are planning or attempting to do. But it's if we fall into the state of fear, I think we have for too long, up and down roller coaster, where we're worried of what might occur. We don't want to take that risk. Well, I say take that risk. Dare to think. Dare to live. Don't just exist in the world. Dare to live. Dare to think, dare to inquire, dare to question, dare to actually get up in the world and be yourself. Not just be a droplet in the sea of similarity, but be an ocean of authenticity.
Sapere aude, as termed the motto of the Enlightenment, dare to think. I hope I got the Latin correctly pronounced there, but but yeah, no, I completely agree. It's we should I've got someone on who doesn't agree with free speech in that
Yeah,
spirit.
that would be a fun one. I mean,
But yeah,
I would happily, I put this message out in this recording with Daniel. I would happily welcome anybody reaching out to me who would be endeavor to want to counteract, challenge my views. That's what it's about. That's what we are freely promoting here today. We're talking about that. I would happily have that conversation with you and to why you take that position, or on what positions you wish to limit or what have you. I would happily have that conversation. I would want to know how you're operating, how you're thinking, and why you're thinking that way. So
yeah.
I put that out there into the to the viewers, the listeners, anyone who knows someone who themselves would want to challenge me on a topic, on an issue, please feel free to reach out.
Yep. I mean, yes, it's essential to have people that you disagree with, whether it's in terms of people that you read or people that you're friends with, people that you engage with on that level without losing friendship. I know I mean I have a friend, a nice little friendship with a conservative Catholic current priest in training, actually. And as you can imagine, we've had our arguments and disagreements, but that doesn't stop us having a good time together, having a nice drink, a nice chat, and
precisely. I mean, and that's a perfect point as to how I conduct myself, and evidently of your own person is I wouldn't want to have dear people I would call dear friends of those who we think akin to each other. Maybe we uphold the same values, but doesn't mean those same values correlate to the same actions or the same output. I want to have friends who are going to challenge me. I want to be able to get in, which I do, loving, passionate, but ardent debates at times with friends, and know that we can laugh afterwards, have a drink, have a bite to eat, and whatever. And we still have that love, that enduring friendship, because that is what matters. And I think that goes back to, I think I posted it today on Twitter, something that Hitchens said, the fatwa was everything I hated. It was demagoguery, dictatorship, censorship, bullying, as opposed to everything I loved: friendship, literature, irony. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's not just a fatwa against a person. It's against the very values we cherish on a human level, on a compassionate level, on an emotional level. It's against everything we so cherish, not as Catholics or as atheists or as agnostics or as Muslims or as Jews or as any faith-based person, but as human beings. It's against the very essence of things that we cherish so dearly in this shortly lived life we have on this blue dot.
It's pale blue dot, yeah. Well, since you mentioned earlier that we have these massive problems where we're at risk of losing some of these ideas. I was quite heartened to read that on Friday morning, Rushdie was actually, before he had gone to go and do his talk,
right?
In the middle of helping out some Ukrainian writers who needed refuge. And he's spent the better part of the last 20, 30 years doing that.
Yeah.
Helping other persecuted writers, through PEN, and I think the International Parliament of Writers, various other organizations. They've that he's not just survived the attack on him, but he has also spent a lot of time and energy on helping others, and I think that's a very admirable example.
Exactly, and that reminds me of I forget the quote. I forget where the quote comes from. I think it was a singer said this quote, but it's kind of apropos. Freedom means freeing someone else. Having those abilities, having those freedoms doesn't mean that I just hold on to them and I take them away from someone else. I limit your speech and I in favor of my own, or I in some way enriching myself and my tribe, my group, my friends, or so forth, and I diminish you, it's about I'm freeing you as well. I'm upholding those values for you, for someone who I might not agree with or I may agree with. Doesn't matter of what capacity. A writer in exile, a protester on the streets of Tehran. This is what it's about. It's not about selecting who you're going to have it or where you're going to do it. You uphold those values everywhere. You don't get it mixed into the differentiation between culture and religion, and it's a different topic. No, it's not. These are human values wherever that person is, and having those freedoms already, having them in the fullest flourishing manner, bestows upon you as an individual who has them to that degree to free someone else, to ensure that they're freed and to secure their freedom.
It's as you know, people like Mandela said, you know, it's you know, if other people aren't free, then you aren't free. If you aren't free, other people aren't free. You know, it's not a completely atomized phenomenon.
Absolutely.
You know, part of freedom is the freedom of other people as well.
Absolutely.
To champion that. I also wanted to say, actually, because I just remembered, going back to Rushdie, that you mentioned Irshad Manji earlier. You're proud to have her as a Canadian.
Right.
Well, Canada should also have a bit of pride as well. And Toronto, in particular, your own province, for Bob Rae, who was the first head of government in the world to embrace Salman Rushdie in the 90s, you know, during the time when he was in hiding. So that's a bit of Canadian pride.
It's always been a point of pride for me. I mean, I don't always, and it's a good point for myself too, I don't always agree with positions taken by Bob Rae, but I know the quality of the integrity of the person he is. I know who he is by his actions he's shown. And it is a point of pride. It's a point of pride for anyone who knows that. I think unfortunately, I think at this point there's so many of the younger generation and even many of my generation have no awareness of that beautiful action. Not only did he embrace them, welcomed him in public in Toronto, he also had him stay in his own house. Mm-hmm. So there's an amazing quality, it says, of the person, says of Bob Rae, in the man, the quality of character, and the quality of the integrity he has in standing up for these values. Where everybody else at that time, as you rightly say, dismissed Salman Rushdie as too much of a risk to be around him. I don't want that attention, what have you. Bob Rae made a beautiful point, and if we dismiss him, we're dismissing everything we stand for. We have no right to protest. We have no right to stand up. We have no right to anything if we don't stand up for Salman.
Mm. Yeah, including you know, that was the position, the cowardly position, not of many people and many heads of state and government, including sadly the British government.
Right.
You know, Thatcher and Major, you know, were not keen on you know, publicly meeting Rushdie or even meeting him. I don't think he ever actually met Thatcher as when she was Prime Minister. Right. You know, and John Major was always a bit distant and hands off. The Blair government was a bit different, and they were the ones who ultimately negotiated the this, you know, his freedom with the Iranians, which looks like now they've reneged on. But yeah, no, it's a scandal that you know, his own head of government didn't you know, stand by him in that such a public and inspiring way.
Yeah, that it's disappointing. It's always been disappointing knowing that, but in some ways also, in some way it's almost moderately irrelevant to me. I mean, it's the citizens who matter to me. It's what they're thinking. It's not these particular people who want to portray an image of themselves to the populace, but it's the acts of the citizens themselves. It's the act of everyday people. It's the act of the individual that I care more about, not the mindset of a politician or prime minister or president, but it's the actions of individuals, of citizens on an individual level, and how they conduct themselves. What are they standing up for? What are they upholding? Like I said, Bob Rae at the time when he was premier of Ontario, he was the only time that there was an NDP, so New Democratic Party, in charge. Not the best party, not the best party in charge. I think a lot of people would agree with that. Not during my time, but at least something I can remember how funny people always talk about it. Not good when it came to managing particular government positions, but certainly had in him immense integrity, a great deal of humanity, and a great understanding of values, of what we value as human beings anywhere we reside. So in that respect, I do have a great amount of respect for and a great amount of pride for him. I've never met Bob Rae, unfortunately. It's someone who I'd love to have on the podcast. I'd love just to meet him and talk to him, and to be quite honest, thank him for that sheer action that he did. That was so monumental and so important and so needed in a time when, aside from his close, intimate friends, no one was really there for him to support or encourage or stand by Salman Rushdie. Other than like Ian McEwan, Christopher Hitchens, Martin Amis, other literary giants at the time too, and I don't even know how many organizations were even there for him, but that's what matters to me. It's not really what some prime minister, president, or elected official is going to do. They're portraying an image of what they desire to present, and wanting also to have, especially this day and age, corporate intent, corporate interests, the head of their aims and pursuits. But I'm more concerned, and I think I'm focused more on what individuals are saying, what individuals are going after, what they're holding dear. That matters, because that dictates the feel of a society. That dictates a lot of what we value, and it also dictates the feel of where progress is going, and where, if it's not progress, where regressiveness is going. So as opposed to what a politician is, someone who's in there for potentially 4 years or a little longer, who only really cares about being elected in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, the list of shame, as I keep saying, of those years is long and diverse. It's conservatives and Marxists and feminists and all the world's religious leaders, pretty much, they all, essentially victim blamed or attacked Rushdie. But at the same time, it is important to emphasize that there were also many heroes, many very brave heroes. Christopher Hitchens obviously being one that I've written a little bit about previously, and he was told after he had hosted Rushdie in his Washington D.C. apartment, that the Americans, the State Department, had picked up some chatter about that there was some talk of threats to Hitchens and his family,
right,
for having Rushdie in his apartment when he was in DC. And there was the story of William Nygaard as well, which always despised. He was the Norwegian publisher of the Satanic Verses, and he stood behind Rushdie all the way. And one day he was outside his home in Norway and was shot in the back. He survived. He pulled through, and from his hospital bed, he phoned Rushdie, and he was still in a pretty bad shape. But he said, "I'm very proud to be the publisher of the Satanic Verses." And once he'd recovered, he kept standing by Rushdie, and even wrote a book about free speech, which Rushdie wrote a foreword for.
Right.
So yeah, the list of shame is very long, but so is the list of heroism from those years.
Absolutely, it's and rightly said there too. Since we're referencing Hitchens there too, I think it's as much as for Salman Rushdie during his time as for Hitchens. There's a quote that applies to both of them. I think it was Hitchens said it of himself, but it kind of applies to both of them. Is, yeah, I lost friends, but I also gained a lot of good friends too. And I think that's the realization. When times like this, you realize who are your true friends? Who are the ones who are actually enduring, not just for the moment, the time, but who are enduring you? And I think that's everything that Salman Rushdie has gone through up until this point. And really anyone, really any literary giant, any author, any publisher, any journalist who has had this pushback, this beratement of proposed censorship or attempted fear of not to write an article, not to write a story. I would say, as opposed to violence and vile actions by vile actors, I'm always reminded, and it's something I was reminded really after this happened, because I know myself, as for everybody, people were reaching out to me, we were all talking back and forth. I know, of course, we were, Daniel, is love is the only subject. Love is the only subject. Love is free speech. Love is the point to inquire. It's to express yourself and your ideas and put those ideas into the world. And perhaps get those ideas braided and put down by someone else who has a better idea. But allowing you to maneuver yourself on your own terms, to think for yourself in the world, and for someone else to uphold that you get to do that as much as I get to do that anyone else. That's love. That's capital L love. That is not just respect or understanding, that's love. To not do that is hate, it's fear, it's demagoguery, it's bigotry, it's bullying. It's everything that Hitchens and I think yourself, I think anyone else of sound mind and body would despise and hate. So I would say to anyone who's at this particular time, so we're recording this now in mid-August, is that love is the only subject, and it always will be. It always will be for me, no matter my age or location or occupation for that matter. Love is the only subject. It's the only thing you should be putting out into the world in all your works and all your endeavors. And in moments like this, in moments of crises, once again, love is the only subject. Don't fall back. Don't turn vile actions into hate, and don't turn the desire, heartfelt sadness and contempt into vengeance. Stay the course, stay stoic, stay curious, and stay focused. And stay focused on the fact that love is the only subject.
Yeah, that's what Rushdie said in his essay on the 10th anniversary of the fact that more and more it feels like love is the only subject to write about. Again, as I've written, it's okay to hate to an extent. There are some things that deserve hate and contempt.
Oh, right, yeah. I'm not opposed to that.
The point is, as you say, that it's not enough. It's not sufficient. You have to know what you love, and you have to fight for that. So if you hate something, that's fine, but make sure you love something too, and put that into the world.
Absolutely, and make sure you love that thing ever more greater than you hate its opposition.
Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree with you on that, Daniel. You have to have a framework, I think, first of what you love, to be able to hate that which opposes it. To only act in such a way where it's hatred or vile actions or demagoguery towards someone or something or some group, and not know what it means to love something and someone, and love and cherish particular values and particular ideas, then you're going to be really lost in the sea. You're going to be really set a sail and not knowing where you're going. You're going to be someone who is just in many ways out of control. You're never going to have that ability to stand up for something, but you likely will fall for everything. But to be able to love earnestly and wholeheartedly, and then to have that thing which you love wholeheartedly, the thing you've attempted to protect wholeheartedly, attacked, attempted to be torn down, berated, dismissed, that's the call for hate. And I do quite vehemently and quite directly despise demagoguery, dictatorship, censorship, someone who would silence me, someone who would silence you, someone who would silence any minority, any voice, and use that as a way of calling for columns of victimhood or all these presumptive titles. I think that's not in any way a framework of love, but it's a framework of an inability to formulate an argument in opposition.
Mm.
But if you are able to direct yourself towards something I think you love, people, ideas, and stand up for those things, whatever those things are, you will live a better life. And when you find out those things are being attempted to be torn down, don't attack someone. Don't raise a fist, grab a weapon, grab a pen, write a paper, use your voice. You have one. And if you don't know what your voice sounds like, find your voice. It's a great time to do it.
And that's going back to the the quote about that you mentioned, Hitchens, everything I hated versus everything I loved.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the point of that quote. It's not just about what he hates; it's about what he's for.
Right.
That reminds me of Salman Rushdie's essay when Hitchens died. He mentioned that his immense solidarity during the Fatwa years, and he says that he felt understood because he too thought in those terms. This is everything I hate versus everything I love, which I've always found quite moving. That they both converged on that same formula for describing how they felt.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that completely. And it's always been one of my favorite quotes by Hitchens, especially on the topic, and specifically now it has to do with Salman Rushdie. But it's an attack on everything. It's an attack on everything that we love as human beings. It's an attack on everything, no matter where you are. We all love the ability to conduct ourselves freely. Those who somehow oppose freedom, oppose the freedom of the individual, the freedom of the individual, the independent mind, the values of freedom of choice, freedom of expression. These are not my enemies. These are not Daniel's enemies. These are not one person's enemies. These are the enemies of humanity. These are the enemies of all of us. These are the ones who don't love anything. These are the ones who don't cherish anything. These are the ones who wish to take away which is cherished and which is loved.
Yep. And again, I'm reminded of another Rushdie quote about the free society, like the one you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Something like human beings make their way in the world by challenging and questioning and arguing and not bowing the knee to gods or men. So wherever that ideology comes from, whether it's secular or religious, those totalizing ideologies, they want
Absolutely.
to put down one way of viewing the world, and if you disagree with it, so much the worse for you. But against that, we have the idea of the open society, which is historically an aberration, and which, as we've seen, is very fragile.
Quite so.
And that needs to be defended explicitly, because we take it for granted as if it's a settled thing, but it's not. It's a radical proposition.
Absolutely.
And it has to be fought for and defended continuously.
Absolutely. And it's up to everyone of every generation, of every place and location to stand up for that and uphold it and ensure that it exists indefinitely. And that we add something to it. We not just have it stagnation, but we add to it. We add to something. We add something new, fresh, enduring, whether it be an idea or more freedom. Yeah. I'm always reminded at times like this of the symbolism when you say about risk. When you mentioned risk a moment ago, I'm always reminded of Prometheus and the risk he took, kind of a pre-enlightenment kind of symbolic figure of giving us fire, of giving us the flame, giving us the flame of thought, the flame for build tools, knowledge, enlightenment. And what was his risk? He got punished for by the gods. And I think there's a great insight into that. There is no freedom. There's no actual life lived to its fullest, as opposed to just existing in the world and being complacent and just sitting down on your couch. There's no life fully lived and fully experienced and fully expressed freely. It does not have risk to it. There's risk at every turn. That's what life really is. And it's how much risk are you willing to endure for the cherishing amounts of freedom that you exhibit and that you have and you cherish, that you possess, but also the others possess, cherish, and have as well.
Well, I'm quite conscious of time, but if I may, I'd quite like to just say a couple of last little things.
Certainly.
Just to, I think it'd be a good way to finish. I think this is a very strong way to finish as well. This call to arms, let's say. It's coming back to Rushdie and what he's gone through. It was surprising and extremely relieving to hear that he had pulled through and that he was talking again and joking again, that he's on the road to recovery. And no doubt it'll be a long road, and who knows what he'll look like by the end of it. But by all accounts, he's still got his mind. He's still got his sense of himself and how he views the world, his principles. So I look forward to the day when he returns to the lecture stage.
Right.
When he publishes his new novel next year, Victory City. A triumphant return. He defied the bastards and he won again. Or perhaps won, because this can never really be won, as we know. But he denied the bastards their victory. And I think the only sort of the best way to stand with him in that is to read his books and to listen to his speeches and read his essays and so on. And I do want to recommend, I have here a first edition of the Satanic Verses.
Fantastic.
It's actually, I think it's sometimes overshadowed by the fact, but I think it's actually a superb work of literature.
It is. I think that's a good point to bring up there too, Daniel. Is and Salman, and I laugh. I can never really say this without smiling and chuckling. Is he always got a laugh from himself whenever he talks. He said, from the amount of people who are always wanting to burn it or kill me or tell me I shouldn't write or that. He said, did you ever actually read it? How many people actually read it is astonishing, very low. They just never read it, the damn thing. It's actually a very funny work. It's a very long work, but it's a very profound read. It's a very deep read too, but it's also very funny. There's a funny moment throughout it. And
it's not an easy read by any means. I think that's what a lot of people off is a challenging read. But
it is, absolutely. And rightly so. The topic is not a light topic.
Yeah, it's. Ayatollah Khomeini certainly didn't read it.
No, I don't think, as far as I'm aware, I don't think he actually could read. To be honest with you.
Oh, really?
As far as I'm aware, I could be corrected. I'm more than happy to be corrected, but I don't think he could. I genuinely don't believe he could read. I think he was able to speak Farsi and understand Arabic as from the Quran, but I don't think he was actually able to read.
Well, maybe if he had read it, he would have enjoyed it. Though I doubt it.
One would think so. And if he didn't enjoy it, one would hope he would have a good literary review, or at least a bad literary review, but wouldn't have raised arms, as it were.
Yeah. Well, here's to Salman Rushdie and to the values he embodies. I've got my water bottle that I'll have to do for a toast. So,
well, cheers to that one, Daniel. And on that note, I think this would be a good time to conclude this conversation and say, as once again, I'm glad we had this conversation. It was the most poignant one and a timely one too. Yeah. And as I say to you, as I'm sure you would say to me, and I say to everyone who's listening, is don't stop. Don't stop. Don't let fear and fright overwhelm you and overtake you. There's fear at every corner. There's fright. There's darkness whenever you let it come in. Be the light. Uphold those values. Allow the sparks of the enlightenment to flourish. Don't let that flame go out. Burn bright, evermore, all the time. And don't let fear mongering, don't let the potentiation of an attack, potentiation of something occurring, frighten you or fear you off from making a statement, from publishing that letter, from writing that book, from publishing that book. Don't let fear overtake you.
Well said.
Oh, cheers to that one.